Hey guys, how's it going? So today I decided to review my Arktos 29er, size large. It's the version 1, and I've actually had this bike for 3 years now and ridden it a little over 2,500 miles in those 3 years. And the terrain has ranged from Washington State to San Diego, all the way to the East Coast in Georgia, and then also up in the Northeast, up in Vermont, Maine, and a few other areas. I've done an adventure race on the bike, a 10-hour adventure race, and a few other longer rides, and then also some short, quick, easy kind of sprint stuff. Never actually full-time raced it other than the adventure race, which is kind of a shame. But I wanted to do a review today because I'm actually selling the bike today, going to meet a guy right after this video and sell it to him. And I kind of want to give some feedback on maybe why I'm selling the bike, what I like about the bike, some things that I'm not as thrilled about the bike. That list is pretty small though, because it was or is a great bike. And then also some of the things I've done to change it up. So just a little bit of feedback on, or not feedback, but on my skill level. So I would consider myself an intermediate rider. I prefer more backcountry, loamy trails as opposed to big jump trails. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm looking at maybe changing the bike out a little bit. And kind of speak more to that as we go on here and I start to review this. So again, this is a size large. It's the version 1, so you'll notice there's no room for water bottle. They have changed the bike up since then, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the geometry. But overall, size large, 65.5 degree head angle from the factory. And then it's a, 75 degree seat tube angle. About 452 millimeter reach from factory, and that's changed a little bit with some of the stuff I've done. So a little bit smaller reach. It's a little bit older as far as the geometry goes compared to some of the newer, bigger, longer, slacker bikes out there today. Very capable though, even with the geometry that it has. Really fun, playful bike, and I'll get more of that here in a little bit. It weighs 33.3 pounds. I weighed it just before this, and that's with cush core in, pedals on, and then no water bottle obviously, but cush core, pedals on, and everything is 33.3 pounds. And I think that plays into why it's such a playful bike. It's pretty light given what it has and cush core, and now it does have XO Plus up front, and then it's just XO Plus in the rear and XO in the front. So not double down or anything like that, but just kind of where it sits now. 33.3 pounds is relatively light for a Enduro bike. Again, when this came out, it was considered Enduro. But by today's standard, I wouldn't really consider this an Enduro bike. It would just be a little bit beefier of maybe like a trail bike, maybe all mountain, I guess is where you could maybe put it. As far as modifications, so let me stick with geometry here while I'm talking about modifications. One of the biggest modifications I did to this bike was installing this slacker. And I can put a link in this in the description here. But the slacker here basically slackens out the head tube angle. So right now, having measured it, it's at 63.7 degrees versus the 65.5. So it has slackened it out. Now it does that in two ways. The first way is it actually adds 10 millimeters below here. So it'd be like if you increased your travel by 10 mil. Now it doesn't increase the travel, it's just adding this little spacer, if you will, below the head tube angle there, or head tube. But then in addition to that, it also, with the steer tube of the fork being, at this angle, now actually because of these cups, it actually alters that and pushes that front wheel further out, creating that 63.7 degree head tube angle there. Now the seat tube, because of the lift here, but also the slackening, the seat tube will stay roughly about where it is. A lot of times if you add more travel, your seat tube will it will slacken along with the head tube angle, and that's not ideal. So it did actually retain that pretty much how it was from factory at that 75 degrees. The reach was decreased for two reasons. One, that obviously the steer tube coming back brings back the handlebars. And the second reason is because the steer tube on this bike was cut so short, I needed to get a shorter stem, and the stem stack height needed to be shorter. And because of that, it also is a shorter stem. I think this comes with a 40 millimeter stem, and this is a 30. So it does kind of reduce that by 10 millimeters. I think overall I measured it, it's at 438 millimeters, so that's pretty pretty short reach for a modern day bike. And it has gone down from that 452 that it was 452 reach from the factory. Another thing that I did to kind of help the bike in its overall performance was change the seat post. So I did two benefits to this. So this is the one-up dropper. It's the 180 mil, and I have it down to 160. So originally this bike comes with a 150 mil dropper, so you have a little bit more raise to it. Now I have the seat post now slammed down, and the other benefit of this one-up is that the overall stack height of where it mounts is lower. So when you drop the seat down, it'll sit lower than the Fox one, factory one that came with it. So the benefit of that is obviously the seat is maybe lower by, I think I measured it, I think it's like 5 or 10 millimeters shorter. So that gives you a little bit more, clearance in the back, and it doesn't contact the tire when it's traveling. So you don't have that error there, or that negative part of it. So that's been nothing but a benefit for me in riding. You'll notice this is the stock seat that came with it. I put this back on to sell the bike with. I had changed that out to an Ergon small, just my preference there. All right, other modifications. Oh, the other big modification was the Pro Tune on the rear shock. So Bike Co. in LA actually did a Pro Tune on this when I was traveling around the country. They were a shop that works on Alchemies at the time. They may still work on Alchemies, but I'm not sure of that. But they do Pro Tunes still on all rear shocks, and that definitely increased the suppleness, kind of like off the top of this bike. I gave him my specific weight, my ride style, and all that, and he went in and changed the shims in it, and it rides way better than it did stock. Stock was a little bit rigid in the rear travel. Right off the top, it kind of was a little bit more bouncy than I would like it to be. If you like a bike that is very firm right off the top, then maybe that's, you leave it how it is. But I liked it. It definitely helped it in San Diego with a lot of the chatter and the bigger rocks, kind of having that suppleness as riding through that. So that was some of the mods that I've done. The 3 big ones really was the head tube, slacker up here, seat tube or dropper, and then also that Pro Tune there. Other than that, push core, things like that. I changed the stickers on the front fork there, general service items and such. Other than that though, how it comes from the factory is pretty dialed overall. One of the things I love about the bike is the paint. The paint is really cool how they hand paint those there. I'm pretty sure they hand painted in Colorado. I know the road bikes are, and I'm pretty sure the mountain bikes, once they get those, they paint those there. And did get a lot of compliments over the years for how this bike just looks overall. Now to kind of get to, let's see here, things that I like about the bike. So the first thing, like I said, is the playfulness, the quick responsive, and that has a lot to do with the weight, and then also the way that the travel goes. It gets very progressive near the end, so you can really plant into turns and push out of those turns pretty easily. The climbing ability of it was way better than I expected. I came from a bike with a lot less travel and was expecting it to just feel like, a tank going uphill, and it was not the case. The travel did really well in keeping it firm, climbing, but then also with that Pro Tune, that suppleness going down. So it was awesome in that regard. Again, like I said, the design, the paint, I love how it looks. And then also to speak to Alchemy as a company, when I bought this bike, it was delayed, but as a result, they gave me that bike bag for free in the back. Did a bunch of other things. The tires came tubeless with sealant already in them. Little things like that that I wasn't expecting when I got the bike. And then also communication. If you reach out to them, they're quick to respond, which is awesome. They've sent me a full write-up on the bike on how to take all the suspension linkage apart, and then they're willing to answer questions, and you can purchase new linkage bearings and other parts, such as derailleur hangers and things like that from them. It's all on the website, and it's getting better. The website originally was a little bit obtuse, but now it's gotten a lot better, and they've changed things when they've gotten the newer versions of bikes. So some things that I'm not crazy about on this bike, number one would be the pivots and maintenance. So maintenance on this bike is a little bit difficult. When I had the rear shock Pro Tuned, I had them go through the rear and tighten everything up, and they did a great job of that. One of the things that the shop did, and the mechanic there worked on these bikes professionally for their racer, their pro racer, Alchemy's pro racer at the time, and he put a lot of Loctite, red Loctite on, I think it's 942 or whatever the number is, on all of those pivot bolts, which was great for keeping it, you know, tight and not loosening up as you're riding it. But over time, obviously, it does loosen up. And so when I went to go take that apart, it was ridiculously hard, obviously, with being red Loctite and, you know, wanting to stay pretty much permanent. So that was very difficult. And I would say that would be my number one overall like gripe with the bike, was just the difficulty in servicing the pivots of the bike. Now, obviously, things like chain, you know, fork, the rear shock, all of those components were easy to service because those are from other companies. But the pivots were difficult. Now, if you live in Colorado, obviously that won't be an issue because you can take it to Alchemy and they can work on it there, and you have that bike shop. I'm sure local bike shops would have done it for me. I just didn't want to risk having someone who isn't familiar with this bike work on it. And like I said, that would probably be my overall biggest gripe with it. The other one would be the geometry, which I don't really guilt the bike for that, because at the time this was pretty progressive. Being a 2020, it was near the end of when you would see this kind of geometry on a bike. But overall, when I bought it in the end of 2019, it was very up to date and, you know, consistent with other bikes at that time. Not progressive by any means, but it was consistent and very progressive from what I previously came from. I came from an older Trek. So yeah, it was a lot better than that. Still is pretty capable today, I feel like, compared to some bikes. Now, obviously, the technology has progressed in the past 2-3 years a lot, but I'm still happy with it. Would still happily ride it today. The other thing is, this is a small thing, is the water bottle. So it does have a water bottle holder here. Obviously, you get mud and gunk on your water bottle when you're riding. So I got a Fidlock strap-on one that would go here. Not the best looking water bottle. And it's also smaller. So I would love to have a water bottle holder inside of the frame there. That would be fantastic. Then the last thing I noted for things I'm not crazy about is the rear is a 157 millimeter Super Boost axle. I didn't have any problems with it, but I will say if you wanted to change out axles or like swap things out, it's a little bit more difficult because 157 is more difficult to find things for because it's not as normal as a 148 millimeter rear length there. But that's really all I have as far as what I'm not crazy about the bike. I already talked a little bit about some of my favorite modifications, being the dropper, that Pro Tune, and then the slacker here. And then the other thing to keep this bike going would just be regular maintenance. I will say this bike is, I don't want to say it's finicky, but if you don't keep up with it, I feel like you really can tell you're not getting the full potential out of it. If everything is cleaned, lubricated, and like ready to go, being the stanchions, the shock, the chain, all that, it rides really well, really smooth, and it feels very, I don't know, luxurious maybe is the word. Not really that word, but yeah, you can tell when it's had its maintenance done and when it is not really there. And that could speak more to just, you know, the shocks and all of that as opposed to the overall bike. But that is one of the things that I noted here. The other thing that I didn't say besides those three things was cush core. That definitely helped out with that suppleness off the top as well as the cush core. One final note here is, so this is the version 1 and they no longer sell the version 1. And the changes that I noted here about the water bottle cage, slacker geometry, and things like that, they've revamped and on their website. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but they actually have their newer bikes and they have the water bottle holder in the frame, slacker geometry and things like that, as well as some new paint schemes and such. Again, it still has the same rear suspension, so I would say that would still apply as far as the maintenance goes. It can be difficult. They do a great job of having a PDF with all of it laid out, and if you're, I would say, I wouldn't consider myself not mechanically inclined. I work on vehicles and I do all my own bike maintenance, and it's been fine, but I would say this has been a little bit more tedious and challenging in that. And so if you are highly skilled with that, it shouldn't be a problem at all. I don't think it's anything, you know, like out of this world. But if you're kind of new to bike maintenance, I would recommend either taking it to Alchemy. You can always ship the bike to them, or maybe make a trip out to Colorado or something. Or if you're in Colorado, that's obviously very easy to have them work on it. So overall, I would say that this bike does really well on kind of that more intermediate trails. I bike it a lot, or bike around here a lot in Georgia, and I've started finding some more gnarlier, steeper, chunkier trails, and that's actually why I'm looking to possibly, or not possibly, but to sell this bike and get another bike. I'm looking to get, just to kind of give an idea of what I'm moving to, so you can tell it's not similar to this at all for the most part. I'm looking at getting a Kona Process X. So tremendously more travel, well, 170 millimeter up front and 160 in the rear versus 140, 160. So more travel. Head tube angle on the Kona is like a 63 and a half. Seat tube is 78. So, and the reach is like just under 500. So it's a lot bigger of a bike. So I wouldn't say that I'm leaving this bike to get something that's very similar, just has some better things. It's honestly, in my opinion, a totally different bike. And so that being said, I don't want to give this any negative review because of that. It's not like I'm leaving this bike because I don't like it. I've had it for 3 years. I greatly continue riding it. I think it's just the trails I'm riding are starting to change a little bit, and my skill level is increasing. And in order to kind of meet that, or to make me feel more comfortable in that steeper down, that's really the main reason why I'm wanting a longer, slacker, more of a sled of a bike, as opposed to more of a nimble, trail bike, all mountain bike. One final note is, if you ride trails, whether it's, not cross country, but not quite enduro style trails, this bike does really well. I was tremendously surprised at how well it does on some of the trails here in Georgia, where usually you see cross country bikes or things like that, where that's like, oh, this is all the travel I need. Any more travel and the bike is sluggish. I never felt that with this bike. Riding with other people on cross country bikes, and them having 120 up front, 110 in the rear, and me having 160, 140, I never felt like I was just falling behind and couldn't keep up. Even on the climbs, and then especially on the downs, I feel like this would, you pass them at that point because it's way more comfortable in the amount of travel that it has. So overall, I would say this is a great bike, even the version 1, for milder trails. It can definitely do steeper stuff. I've ridden pretty steep stuff in San Diego, in Montana, some gnarly, chunky, crazy backwoods trails that are not really well maintained, so it gets pretty hairy back there. And it did really well. It did really, really well in that, and it would handle more than what I could even, my capability would be at. Again, I'm just looking at getting something that's going to make me feel more comfortable on those kind of trails. This would kind of like go to the edge on that, which could be fun for some people. But overall, I would say this bike has been fantastic. I'm sad to let it go today after having it for 3 years and ridden it all over the country. I'm very sad to let it go, but I think it's time to move on to newer, bigger things. May come back to a similar travel bike down the road, depending on how I like, my next bike and how long and slack and all that is. But I'll hopefully do a review on the new bike once I get it. But I just wanted to post this up. It's my experience with the Alchemy Arktos 29 version 1.